I'm Suzi Landolfi, and welcome to Be Crazy Well. Now, why would a therapist say that? Because we all have mental health struggles, even therapists. The good news is we have so much more information about how we can be crazy well. On my podcast, we don't focus on what's wrong with us. We want to know what happened to us. We're going to explore how trauma affected us, both negatively and positively. That's right. I said positively. It's called post-traumatic growth, and it's a real thing. Be Crazy Well will share mental health wellness practices, the newest mental health research, and most importantly, how we all get to create the person we deserve to be and the life we deserve to live. So join the mental health evolution and be crazy well.
To see within is to know yourself well enough to be able to put yourself into other people's shoes and to bring out the best in you.
Welcome, everybody. And that theme song that you just listened to about Be Your Best Self is by Calvin Love. Go look him up on Spotify and all the other music places. He is a great songwriter and a wonderful man. And I'm so appreciative that he lets me use that song for Be Crazy Well and Be Your Best Self. I'm here with Scott Wert. Here we are. And Scott, you are part of an organization that, if this isn't one of the most important things to talk about, not just for veterans. I have a grandson who's going to play football, and I've been an athlete, and I understand this whole idea that we have got to understand about our brains. So here I am talking to people about how they think and feel. Not that I really give a shit. To be perfectly honest, I'm the only therapist says, I don't care how you feel. I don't care how you think. I care what you do. Because I know that changes your brain, which we'll also talk about. So Scott, tell us about the organization that you work with.
Okay. Yeah. I am fortunate enough to be the military program manager at the Concussion Legacy Foundation. And that was started in 2007 by Dr. Chris Nowinski and Dr. Robert Cantu. And it is centered on, it's for years been centered on concussions, obviously, and chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And how do we go about treating those things? And so CTE, unfortunately, isn't able to be diagnosed until after death. So right now, the most important thing we can do is research the brains after people have passed, if they are good enough to give us their brains to research. So
like, you literally have a place on your website where I could go and sign up and tell my family that when I die, my brain goes to you. Is that correct? If there's anything left of it at that point, I'm not sure. Might have used it all up, but
yeah, that's exactly right. So anybody who wants to pledge to donate their brain can do that. Doesn't have to be veterans, doesn't have to be athletes. Obviously, since the foundation was started in 2007, it has primarily focused on a lot of athletes because that's where you see a lot of the exposure to concussions. And so we really had athletes and veterans plugged in from the start, but it can be anybody. And even if somebody doesn't have has never had a history of concussions or TBIs, they can pledge to donate. We need those people's brains as well to have that baseline to understand the differences that take place in the brain when something like this happens.
one of the things that I know even my grandson may not know, and most of us don't know, is what are the symptoms of a concussion? So many times those young athletes or even a combat veteran will go, no, I'm fine. So if we all knew, like I get messages all the time about what a stroke looks like, what a heart attack looks like. I'm in that age group now where that can happen at any moment. So we get to know those, right? How come we're not telling people more and more about what the symptoms are of a concussion? Because I know your organization does that too.
Yeah, I mean, we try to educate on the signs and symptoms, obviously. And, they can be long-term symptoms. They can be, short-term symptoms. It's almost like the whole COVID pandemic now. You have people with long COVID and people who have it, just for a short amount of time. But yeah, so the signs and symptoms can go from anywhere from when it happens to blacking out But it doesn't have to be a blackout. It can just be headaches. It can be nausea and things like that as you first start out with a concussion. But over time, there's cognition issues, there's depression, there's anxiety that can occur with people that have had concussions or TBIs. And when I say concussion, a concussion is a mild traumatic brain injury. And a lot of people don't associate those two things together, but it is, and as me growing up, and I'm sure you heard it as a kid too, if somebody gets a dinger or a stinger or, they just get back up and go keep playing,
Right.
that's a concussion. And, I don't think, we just didn't know enough about it at the time, even when I was a kid. And so, we're finding out more and more, but even the risk of suicide and the risk of many different disorders gets higher with people who have had TBIs.
So one of the things when I was growing up was, and they still have them again, they went out of fashion for a while, now they're back in, was I always heard that we shouldn't be on trampolines as kids
Mhm.
because we shouldn't jog our brain by anything more forceful than how high that child can jump.
Mm.
So if I can jump this high, that's all I should be doing. That's what my brain can handle. Whereas if you put me on a trampoline or something else, even throwing a baby in the air, whatever it is that we do, thinking that's okay, that can cause concussion as well. Do you guys speak about that at all, or is that?
I haven't heard that specifically. I have to kind of defer to my CEO, Dr. Nowinski, and some of the neuroscientists that work at Boston University with us and at the VA up in the Boston area with us. They would be able to kind of speak to that better. But one of the things we do worry about, and you kind of brought it up there, is the subconcussive impacts, and that's what chronic traumatic encephalopathy is. And so it doesn't just have to be concussions. You might not have a history of concussions necessarily, but you could have a history of subconcussive impacts. And people like NFL linemen who repeatedly hit each other, thousands upon thousands of times a season between practice and games. As you build those seasons up over years and years, those subconcussive impacts are what we're seeing a lot of NFL players with CTE. And so that's what we worry about with veterans too, obviously with Project Enlist. But that should be a concern of everybody, honestly, with kids, especially. And you talk about your grandson. It's one of the things we try to talk about is trying to stay away from tackle football until you're at least 14 years of age. And that's because that's when the brain starts, being more of a mature, at its developmental level is 14. If you can wait longer, wait longer. But we're, the studies have shown it, that's where you should be is, tackle after 14 at the earliest.
So he's 17, almost to 18. So thank you for that. So I'm feeling a little better. Subconcussion would be the fact that my brain is getting jarred because of my body going up against something, not necessarily my head. Is that correct? Right.
It could be your body. It could be maybe your head getting tapped, and some, like if I were sitting in the back of, one of the things I think about a lot is I sit in the back of a 7-ton truck or a military, personnel carrier. And as, in training or even in combat situations, and you have a Kevlar on, but your head's bouncing all over the place. It's, it's not like you're sitting in a Cadillac. So,
Right.
so
Right.
things like that can be significant. Or, pilots that, like naval aviators that land on an aircraft carrier, and every time they hit that aircraft carrier resting gear, you're going from how many 100 miles an hour to stop. Just things like that are what I would kind of associate with subconcussive. Or like I said, the NFL lineman, if it's in a sports analogy, maybe in the NHL or hockey. My oldest son plays hockey. It's kids that are getting jolted a lot, if you're not paying attention to that, so there's ways to get around it. There's, maybe just don't hit as much in practice, like we try to say with the NFL. And I think they start instituting that. We're trying to get colleges to do the same thing. So, it's interesting to think about the brain like that, because people would just associate bad injuries with missing a limb or or having some type of wound that's, deep penetrating wound. But, we need to start taking our brains more seriously when it comes to brain injury, even with concussions. And now this research is being done by CLF is really and Boston University just showing the impacts of that in the long term with people who have played lots of different sports.
So I know some athletes, let's take a boxer, for instance. We would assume that a boxer is getting a lot of concussions because of getting hit in the head.
Yeah.
I also understand that child abuse. So
Yeah.
sometimes when I'm talking to someone, I'm not just asking about their sport or their military service. I'm going to find out what happened to them as a child. Because if
Yes.
that kid was thrown up against a wall or punched by a father or mother, I need to know that. I need to understand that that kind of abuse is also causing some of what we're seeing right now. Is that true as well?
Yeah, that's really important. The military in general, you recruit heavily from athletes because we need people who are athletic to do their jobs on the
Right.
battlefield. And so a lot of the people that end up coming in as, some of the brain donors we have, a lot of the brain donors we have in the military circles that their family have been good enough to donate their loved one's brain, they have previous exposure through sports, and some of them through abuse. So, I mean, I've seen that several times, or anything else in their childhood. So that childhood history all the way up through adolescence, through high school and into service or whatever your professional, sport would be or anything else is all, it's additive,
Right.
it's all going to add up.
Yeah, we call trauma cumulative emotionally and mental health wise. We know that now. And that's the same of how it affects the body. So maybe this isn't actually part of your organization yet, but I'm going to predict that once you start to get into the brain and look at it, that when you start seeing white spots on people's brains, when you start seeing that autoimmune issue of eating away at the myelin sheath, it's not going to just be concussion at that point. It could be the trauma of emotional and physical abuse that can wear us down physically so badly that our body will actually start to attack ourselves and it will attack the brain. So when we was look at these brains, that childhood history is so important because of that idea that, well, maybe these spots, this CTE might have been also caused. There's a possibility that it was the child abuse that first started to bring that on. And then the concussions in the military or the sport just kept it going or added to. And I talked to you last time, we talked about emotional concussions. And that's what I call them. I call them that you are literally hurting your brain every time you're screamed at, every time you are neglected and abused, that isn't a concussion of sorts to your brain.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we talk to military units or veterans groups, what we tell them is there's a couple problems that we see, and one is, we talked about TIs. That's problem one, and that's that's kind of the signature wound of modern warfare. What we've seen in the last 20 years, 430,000 veterans have had a TBI according to the VA. So very, very much a problem. And then problem two is CTE, because what you're stating, it's cumulative over time. Once CTE starts, there's 4 different stages, and it can get worse. The more hits you take, the longer time goes on, and it usually doesn't present itself until a little bit older, later in life, like midlife. But we have seen it as early as early 20s, and some people who have had a lot of repetitive subconcussive hits. So that's problem number 2 in the veteran community too, because we're starting to see CTE more prevalent there. But the big kind of the perfect storm that comes together is when you add TBIs, CTE, suspected CTE, and PTSD all together, because you have all those things coming together at once.
Yeah.
The signs and symptoms of TBI can be very similar to PTSD. And so somebody who's had TBIs and has PTSD, which can be very common in military circles, especially, it's very hard to pull those symptoms apart and say this one's from TBI and this one's from PTSD. And so that's part of what our research is also help discover and find out is, how can we pinpoint those things and pull that apart in those diagnoses so that we treat those 2 injuries differently, because they are treated differently, but they can be in the same person and intermingling signs, basically.
And they're treated differently, and yet they affect each other. So there's a study on ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and we didn't know we were doing this study. What we did was Kaiser Permanente did, I think it was about 15,000 adults that they asked about their childhood from 50. They were patients who were 50 and older. And what they discovered was those that had the worst childhoods had the most, what we call aging diseases.
Oh,
That
wow.
they had all of this high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, all of these things. And it was definite correlation between what happened to you as a child and how that long-term effect. And that's the same with what you're talking about, is it's cumulative. It doesn't show the signs till later in life, and that it absolutely is something we have to take care of our brain physically and emotionally. It's not okay to just say, I'm going to put a helmet on you and take care of your brain and then go home and scream at your kid without the helmet. And the helmet's not going to help if they're screaming. The helmet will not protect you from screaming.
Right.
So, yeah. So it's that idea that it's going to be to see how we honor that the physical and emotional work together. They can help us and hurt us at the same time. So I'm excited about this because I think what happens is we're going to start to bring them close together. And it's organizations like yours that are going to say, wait a minute, we're going to look at outside concussions and inside concussions. We're going to look at everything that affects the brain so that we can do better about helping people stay healthy.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there are signs and symptoms, like I'd mentioned some of the earlier ones about concussion, they'll pop up right away. And then you won't see the other signs and symptoms, the cumulative stuff, until a little bit more down the road. And it's an interesting thing because everything that you see out there with ALS and dementia and Alzheimer's, all those other brain disorders, brain diseases. And so it's one of those brain diseases that we can actually affect by putting in certain rules or policies and things in sports, or just noticing symptoms and signs and understanding that a little more and educating the community so we can watch out for this in our children, because that's the scariest thing to me. We have kids playing contact sports and people don't really think about that, what's happening to their brains if they're doing it at a very young age, which I did,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I think it's also interesting that, and I know once information comes out, there's a certain group of people that like to hold on to the old school thinking. Okay. So the idea that, well, I didn't wear a helmet when I was riding my bike in the neighborhood. We don't, those kids are soft today.
Right.
And I know we hear that, right? We get it. So this idea that we can help people understand that the helmet is cool. The helmet is part of what we should always have had. If we had known then, we might have been better at helping. So I actually, we didn't know always about this idea of what child abuse was and how it
Right.
affected us. So I love to be a science nerd, and I love to look at a scientific fact until it's not, until we know more. And as we know more, then we can help more. We can help one another more.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that is interesting too, because, the helmets were a big thing, have a proper fitting helmet and all that when I was a kid. And now it's like, well, it doesn't matter what helmet you have on. If you are exposing these kids to more and more repetitive hits, then they haven't made a helmet yet that's going to stop your brain from rattling around in your skull.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
It might stop some very serious trauma, but it's not going to stop a mild TBI or a concussion. So, or just many subconcussive hits, which can even be worse. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to share about what your organization is moving towards? Can people sign up just to get your newsletters and things like that? Can you give people the website and let them know how they can contact you?
Yeah. So our main effort in the veteran space for the Concussion Legacy Foundation is Project Enlist, and it's easy to get to. projectenlist.org is the website. And what we are asking is that specifically veterans from this side, but there's also, you can be an athlete and sign up. We have on the Concussion Legacy Foundation site as well. But for Project Enlist, we're asking veterans, whether they've experienced TBI or not, to pledge their brain for donation after they pass. And the good thing is, I'm not asking for your brain today. I want your brain when you have a long, healthy life.
You don't want mine today. It's so worn out from this week. Like, it's not okay. Go ahead.
What I'm asking for is after a long, healthy life, that people think about pledging their brains for donation, and it does two things for us. One, obviously, eventually there will be a donation, and their brain goes to research. The more brains we have to analyze, the better the research is going to be, the better the studies are going to be. Number two, though, is that also helps us build our surveillance network. As we ask people to pledge their brains, then they get a little more educated, all the different brain disorders and the things that are going on with veterans and TBIs and CTE. And they can then, in our networks of veterans, we all stick close together. We know our buddies that we've been in combat with and who we've served with. And as one of them, our friends may pass away, then we can reach out to that family as a surveillance network and say, hey, would you mind, do you think donating would be in the future for you and your family member? And so it's important because that surveillance network isn't just going to happen. And it does for like professional athletes. The media comes in and we know when a professional athlete passes away, that surveillance network's kind of just built in to our society. Whereas for veterans, we have to build that surveillance network. So that's what Project Enlist is all about, really, is building that and making people aware. And Operation Brain Health is the other part of it too. So we don't just want your brains in the future. We also want to help veterans now. And our effort for that is Operation Brain Health. And it has some really good resources on how to take care of yourself, whether it be if you're suffering from TBIs or suspected CTE or even PTSD. We have some great doctors on there that from Wounded Warrior Project, from the VA, and some other really close experts that work with us on a regular basis that have some great videos, some great resources that can help people out now.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm so grateful. And of course, I will be a little nervous in the stands. My grandson plays. I'm going to just get him a coach to teach him how to run so fast no one can hit him. That's my strategy right now is that you're never getting hit because you're going to be the fastest one out there running to catch the ball and no one's ever going to catch you. So I don't have to worry because I don't want to.
That's right. We all worry. I worry, but now that I've been at CLF, every time I see a kid get hit on the ice in my son's hockey game, I worry,
Of course. And there's, we all get to choose a certain amount of risk, like we do. And there's no guarantees. And it may be worse when they're driving the car than it ever is on the football field, depending on how big the team members are, like, the level of play and all of that. So you're right. We don't want to just have a big blanket. Oh my God, football's the worst. We want to say, okay, what are we doing? How are we managing this? What are we teaching our kids? And what are we doing at home? Like, how are we helping at home as well?
Yeah. And if anybody is interested in also just helping us out as volunteers or donating or anything else, that's all also projectenlist.org. We have program partners. We have some awesome partners that work with us, and some of them have some research as well. So when you sign up there, it's not just pledging your brain. It's also a chance to be on our research registry. So if somebody's struggling from TBIs or any type of brain disorder, we do have some research opportunities that they might be eligible for that we can help them out. Well,
that's terrific. And I know that you work with other organizations like the Marcus Institute for Brain Health. We had Spencer Milo on, and he talked about that. So what's so wonderful is that all of you are working together. So there's all kinds, home base, all kinds of organizations right now that are understanding the importance of this and the treatment and how to help one another. So I really appreciate how well all of you work together, because I know you all, and I'm now watching this wonderful collaboration where people are giving, hey, wait, if you're going to go to Marcus Institute for Brain Health, go to home base. Like, they've all kinds of organizations that are helping with that. So it's not just information, it's also help as well. There are resources out there.
Yeah. And that's part of my job too, is to make those connections with other veteran service organizations and places that are willing to help. So that one, I can hand it off to our helpline. We have a helpline as well that you can find on our webpage, and they will do one-on-one support to get you to the right place. So I can help, I can kind of assist that. And then at the same time, work with other VS that may be dealing with PTSD or substance abuse or all those things that come along with brain injury and service related injuries. I'm trying to make those contacts so that we can keep the community going. It's there's no ego in this. It's just helping people out. So
I so appreciate it. Scott, thank you. And I expect to hear from you soon about how you're going to start your farm someday, that you're going to have this nonprofit. I'm just telling everybody now, I'm just putting it out there to make sure that I'm putting it out in the universe, that you guys get to start that nonprofit farm that you're talking about. And I'm so grateful to know you, and I would be excited to help you build that. That's one of my things that I do. So I'm really excited.
yeah, horses are in my future. I have a feeling I'm going to go out and plow the fields right after this. And figure out plans.
Well, thanks again. Really appreciate it. I want everybody to know that we're here to help you be crazy well. And because I happen to be a licensed therapist, don't hold that against me. I want you to know that everybody has the right to create the person they deserve to be and the life they deserve to live. That's why we're here. And so in any way that Be Crazy Well can help, you can email me. We always put my email up there. And I'd really appreciate it. And we'll also put your information up there too, Scott. And so that people, once this airs, they'll be able to see and be able to take your information down. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Suzi. It's been awesome. I appreciate it.
Bless you. And take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.